For many wrestling fans, when we think of WrestleMania, we often think of one man, a man that has featured in 27 WrestleMania shows since 1991, a man that has achieved an unparalleled record of 25 wins and 2 losses over the years on the grandest stage of them all. When we think of WrestleMania, we must think of The Undertaker. For over 2 decades, The Undertaker managed to maintain a winning streak of 21 wins before finally falling at WrestleMania 30 to Brock Lesnar. There is no doubt that this is an incredible achievement for any wrestler, and he has featured in some brilliant matches over this era. It is simply amazing considering The Undertaker's WrestleMania career nearly spans 3 decades. It seems unlikely that we will see the dead man once again at this year's event, so I took the almighty task of rewatching every Undertaker match at Mania since 1991, and I have graded them all. At the very best, a match can receive the unique Pro Wrestling Weekly UK seal of approval. However, at the very worst, a match can receive an F grade. With 27 matches to discuss, let's get into it. I'm Liam from Pro Wrestling Weekly UK, and this is The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak graded. WrestleMania 7, Jimmy Snuka. To kick off the streak, we're going to step back in time all the way to the 24th of March 1991 at WrestleMania 7. Leading up to this event, The Undertaker had been involved in various matches with superstars and a whole bunch of jobbers, which usually ended in a squash match. This led to a feud with Jimmy Superfly Snuka, and this match was no different to what we'd already seen from Taker. Now we have to remember that way back in 1991, the effects on offer to WWE weren't as visually stunning as the ones we get to see today. So they did a great job of creating a spooky visual for the dead man during his entrance. And this is apparent when you look at the crowd reactions. As the match gets underway, we soon see that this is going to be very similar to the previous squash matches that we're used to at this point for Taker. It's a very dominant start for Taker, with some heavy strikes and some incredible agility for a big man. As the match moves on, Taker continues to no-sell Jimmy Snuka's moves, making him seem like an undefeatable monster. And one thing I would like to point out at this stage is that Taker's character shows little to no emotion or reaction during most of the match. Like I said, this match builds The Undertaker as an impossible opponent to defeat, as simply getting him to the ground is a difficult task for Snuka. There's not much else to say about this match. It's short, it's dominant, it sets the stage for what we're about to see over the coming years from The Undertaker. Overall, I would give this match a rank C. WrestleMania 8, Jake the Snake Roberts. Let's fast forward now to WrestleMania 8, April 5th, 1992. Leading up to this event, The Undertaker had aligned himself with Jake the Snake Roberts in a feud with The Ultimate Warrior. However, during an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event in February 92, The Undertaker turned face and finally opposed Jake the Snake. This simple angle of 2 allies splitting up and facing each other at WrestleMania led nicely into their match. During this match, it was quite clear to see how WWE wanted to book The Undertaker. They were trying to book him as a monster type of character, and you could see this as he was moving very slow. He had monster-like movements, almost the way you would expect a Frankenstein character to walk around. Very slow, small steps, stiff body, not much reaction happening. The match itself did seem quite boring. WWE were obviously going for another dominant match just like the Snuka match we've seen in the previous year. However, this match was much longer and took too long to get to that stage. At points the match was very slow as well. There was a sequence where Jake hit a DDT, Undertaker sat up. Jake hit a clothesline, Undertaker sat up. It almost felt like every time Jake hit a move, he stood there and waited for Undertaker to sit up. And this really didn't help the idea that Taker was meant to be the dominant monster in this feud, as Jake had multiple opportunities to finish the match, but instead of finishing the match, he stood there and waited for Taker to regain himself. After the second DDT, Jake went outside to attack The Undertaker's manager, Paul Bearer. However, The Undertaker sat up, got outside the ring and delivered a tombstone piledriver to Jake onto the mat outside the ring. He simply picked him up, rolled him back into the ring and pinned him for the 3. If WWE were trying to create the same effect that they had at WrestleMania 7, this match was far too long for that to work. And like I said, it got boring at points because it was too slow. So overall, I would give this match a rank D. WrestleMania 9. Giant Gonzalez. In late 1992 and early 1993, The Undertaker had been feuding with Harvey Whippleman and had had various matches with wrestlers that Whippleman had been managing at the time. During the 1993 Rumble, Giant Gonzalez was introduced, who illegally entered the Royal Rumble and eliminated The Undertaker, setting up a nice feud heading into WrestleMania 9. This match was by far the biggest challenge that Undertaker had faced so far at WrestleMania, as simply the size and power difference between him and Giant Gonzalez was incredible. There was a lot more striking in this match, and there was a lot more back and forth, which added a whole lot of excitement that we hadn't seen in the previous two Mania matches. This is the first time that we truly got to see a weakness in The Undertaker's character, as he was manhandled by the Giant in various points of the match. Although the match wasn't terrible to watch, as we got towards the end, this match took a really bad turn and got very confusing. Giant Gonzalez pulled out this white cloth and began to smother The Undertaker with it. The commentators told us that this cloth was covered in chloroform, and Randy Savage even told us that he could smell it from the commentary table. The Undertaker passed out eventually, and the bell rang. The medical team arrived to ringside, and Taker was stretchered out of the match, with Giant Gonzalez standing in the ring. There was no explanation as to what has just happened, and the ring announcer or commentators didn't explain who had won the match. However, after Taker had finally been rolled through the curtain and was finally backstage, his music hit once again, and Taker returned. He came out to the ring, took out the Giant Gonzalez, and then the ring announcer explained that Undertaker had in fact won the match by disqualification. It was all very confusing and led to a very poor ending. With a better ending, this match might have got a higher rank, but with the ending they decided to run for, I'm going to give this match a rank D. WrestleMania 11. King Kong Bundy. After missing WrestleMania 10 due to a legitimate injury, The Undertaker returned to set up a feud between himself and the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, who throughout The Undertaker's absence had introduced his own Undertaker character. King Kong Bundy, who was managed by DiBiase at the time, stepped up to face The Undertaker at WrestleMania 11. The first thing you notice about this WrestleMania match is that it was the first lights-out entrance for The Undertaker, which visually was much better than the previous three entrances we had seen. There was also the nice addition of thunder noises throughout the entrance. This really added to the spookiness and the supernatural feel that The Undertaker tries to bring with him. In my opinion, this was the best entrance so far out of The Undertaker's streak. We also got to see a new look for Taker. He was less monster-like in his movements and showed more of a human element to his character. The match itself was interesting to watch, and The Undertaker included a variety of new moves that we hadn't seen in the previous three matches. One standout from this match is the clear storyline that ran throughout it. The Undertaker, who normally comes to the ring with his manager Paul Bearer and his urn, didn't have control of his urn during this match. Instead, Ted DiBiase had control of it, and throughout the match, The Undertaker was simply trying to retrieve it from him. At one point, The Undertaker was able to get the urn back. However, The Undertaker wasn't able to keep possession of the urn for long, as Ted DiBiase called out Karma, another corporation member, to the ring. Karma came running to the ring, stole the urn, and with some help from King Kong Bundy, who distracted The Undertaker, Karma was able to escape backstage with the urn. The match continued, and Bundy picked up The Undertaker for a power slam. He then performed an avalanche squash to squish The Undertaker against the corner of the ring. However, The Undertaker did not take too much damage from this, and simply performed a power slam followed by a clothesline to get the pin and win the match. This match wasn't too exciting, but it wasn't unbearable. There were some slow spots in the match, particularly in the middle, but with the continuous story that ran throughout the match, and the fact that it picked up for a nice sudden finish, I would give this match overall a rank C. WrestleMania 12. Diesel. This match between The Undertaker and Diesel at WrestleMania 12 had a nice storyline to it. The Undertaker had faced Bret Hart for the WWE Championship at the 1996 Royal Rumble. However, an interference by Diesel cost him this match. As revenge, The Undertaker cost Diesel his WWE Championship match at In Your House Rage in the Cage. the two finally decided to settle this feud at the grandest stage of them all. Similarly to WrestleMania 11, The Undertaker's entrance had a bit of an upgrade this year, as it included the use of big smoke during the entrance. And by big smoke, the smoke covered the entranceway in a style that we're more accustomed to nowadays with The Undertaker's entrances. This was a really nice touch and added a little bit more to his entrance. It was a nice even start to the match, as there was a lot of back and forth, and there was a really nice use of agility between these two really big men who were moving around the ring like two much smaller guys. The match was much more exciting to watch than previous years. Going against another big man like Diesel, The Undertaker showed some more weakness in his character, as Diesel was hitting heavy strikes and damaging The Undertaker throughout the match. But The Undertaker showed the grit and perseverance that his character has, as he took a lot of the damage and was able to come back and pick up a victory in the match. This match was interesting to watch, and it took on a very different style to what we'd seen in the previous streak matches, as this match built to an ending, rather than having slow spots and then an all of a sudden finish. And as we'd seen before in previous streak matches, The Undertaker picked up the victory after hitting the devastating Tombstone Piledriver move. In my opinion, this was a good match, and I really enjoyed watching it. It felt like WWE were finally going in the right direction with The Undertaker's character at WrestleMania. Overall, I would give this match a rank B. If you haven't seen this match before, I would recommend going and checking it out, as it is a great watch. WrestleMania 13, Psycho Sid. The year is 1997, and we've already experienced 5 of The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak matches. However, WrestleMania 13 had a new feel to it, as it was the first time that The Undertaker had a title match at WrestleMania. But also, it was the first time that The Undertaker had main evented a WrestleMania event. 2 very interesting pieces of trivia, and it just shows you how quickly the WWE wanted to move this man into the main event picture, as only 6 years ago he had a squash match at WrestleMania which didn't really lead to anything, and now he's main eventing for the WWE title. Another side note to this match is there was no Paul Bearer present, and we've seen him at every WrestleMania match up to this stage. The lead up to this match saw Bret Hart win a vacated WWE Championship, but lose it almost immediately the following night on Raw to Psycho Sid. The Undertaker simply challenged Sid for a title match at WrestleMania 13, which Sid accepted. Now, onto the match. The entrance in this match was amazing. It was the first time that we had a real Undertaker feel to his entrance, and I mean that goosebump type of feeling that we get every time The Undertaker appears. This match was 24 years ago, and the entrance alone was still able to give me that goosebumps type of feeling that I expect from his matches. In Sid's entrance, they had a very unique and awesome visual, as the word Sid was highlighted in pyro behind him during his entrance. This added a whole lot to the entrance, as both men were being treated like stars and not just one of the men. There was a nice stare down between the 2 matches to start this off. However, before the match was able to get underway properly, Bret Hart came out to interrupt and began to complain about what was happening. Now, this was a nice little moment, as Bret Hart had lost the title to Psycho Sid quite quickly in recent months. However, this wasn't the last time we were going to see Bret Hart throughout the night. The match began, and there was a nice power struggle between the 2 big men. However, the match quickly moved into a slow section. Taker took a lot of offense and damage from Psycho Sid, but Sid didn't seem to be aiming to close the match. This was very strange, as you'd expect someone to try and finish the match quickly, especially as we've seen that The Undertaker is on a 5-0 win streak at WrestleMania at this point. The man is obviously hard to beat, and I would have thought that you would be trying to get that win as quick as possible, but Sid didn't appear to be trying to go for the win. There wasn't a lot of attack from Undertaker in the first part of the match, which was very strange to watch. He just took a lot of damage. There was a lot of aerial moves, and like I said, it was very slow in parts. The match was interesting to watch, and it definitely wasn't the worst WrestleMania match I've seen from The Undertaker at this point. However, more Bret Hart interferences caused this match to become a little bit sloppy in my opinion. Bret Hart interfered and hit Sid with a chair shot, which was then followed up by a choke slam, a pin and a kick out. This match by far wasn't the worst match that we've experienced during the Undertaker's streak up to this point. However, the ending of the match I'm not a fan of, as Bret Hart decided to come down and interfere once again. He hits Psycho Sid with a chair shot, which the Undertaker followed up with a tombstone piledriver before pinning Sid to win the WWE Championship. Now, up until this point, we've seen Undertaker defeat 5 men at WrestleMania, including the likes of Diesel, Jake the Snake Roberts, and King Kong Bundy. So it's clear that the Undertaker is always up for the challenge, and that the big man isn't enough to put the dead man down. So I don't believe it was necessary to have Bret Hart interfere in this match. But I was watching the match as a standalone event, so obviously the interference followed up in a story afterwards. As I mentioned, The Undertaker won the match and won the WWE Championship. This was his second WWE Championship reign in his career. And of course, it was the first time that he had won the championship at a WrestleMania event, which was incredible to see. Overall, the match wasn't terrible, but I think it could have been better. So I would give this match a rank C. WrestleMania 14. Kane. WrestleMania 14, and we have an incredible feud heading into the event. The Undertaker lost the WWE Championship to Bret Hart at SummerSlam 1997, which set up a Hell in a Cell match between him and Shawn Michaels. However, during the match, Paul Bearer brought out Kane, the Undertaker's brother, to cost the Undertaker the match, allowing Shawn Michaels to pick up the victory. At the beginning of the following year, the Undertaker challenged Kane to a match at WrestleMania 14. As always, Undertaker's entrances at WrestleMania just seemed to get better and better, and this year was no different, as we had an eye-catching entrance. Before the Undertaker was introduced, a piece of classical music began to play, and a line of hooded druids made their way down the ramp, each holding a flaming stick. These druids lined the rampway, creating an incredible visual. The Undertaker then made his entrance, which of course was incredible to watch. This was the first time that we had got to see The Undertaker versus Kane, and this was also Kane's very first WrestleMania event, so there were some very nice additions to this match. It was a nice opener into the match, as it was a very even fight between these two big guys. There was a lot of back and forth, and early on it wouldn't have surprised you if either man had picked up the victory. Incredibly, there was no slow parts to this match. This match was full, non-stop action from start to finish, which was incredible, and it was great to see, as in previous years we'd seen a lot of slow parts in a match, causing the match to get slightly boring. This certainly wasn't going to happen at WrestleMania 14. After the absence of Paul Bearer at last year's WrestleMania, this year we had Paul Bearer return, but not siding with The Undertaker. This year he was siding with Kane, which added a very interesting element to the match, as Paul Bearer created very nice opportunities for Kane to do things behind the ref's back. One moment he created a brilliant referee distraction so Kane could use the ring steps to his advantage and attack The Undertaker. Throughout the match there was some brilliant power striking between the two men, and Kane began to dominate the match, beating down The Undertaker in a way that we hadn't really seen in previous years. The Undertaker was driven through the announcer's table at ringside, and we truly began to feel that this man has what it takes to defeat The Undertaker. As the match went on, The Undertaker was able to hit a tombstone piledriver to Kane, and as many fans in the audience believed, that was the match finished. After being beat down for so long during the match, The Undertaker was able to gain the upper hand and hit a tombstone piledriver to Kane. Typically, this move finishes the match. So just like many people in the audience, I believed this match was about to finish. However, Kane kicked out of the tombstone piledriver, which nobody does. After seeing Kane kick out of the tombstone, it was clear to see that he was clearly on the rise to become a top guy within the company. The match continued, and The Undertaker hit another tombstone piledriver, and unlike anything we'd ever seen before, Kane kicked out of it again. Not only had no one kicked out of a tombstone piledriver before in the past, but Kane was able to kick out of 2 in the same match. Kane was certainly one to watch. But all good things have to come to an end, and The Undertaker hit a 3rd tombstone piledriver to pick up the victory. After the match, Paul Bearer came into the ring and attacked The Undertaker. Taker knocked him down, but Kane was able to hit Taker with a chair and deliver his own version of the Tombstone Piledriver, driving Taker's head straight into the steel chair below. This match had a very intense feel to it from start to finish. Kane was able to dominate most of the match and was even able to kick out of 2 Tombstone Piledrivers before Undertaker picked up the victory. The attack to Undertaker after the match just allowed Kane to define just how much of a monster he was going to be. This match did a brilliant job of allowing both men to leave the arena both looking as strong as they did when they walked in. I thoroughly enjoyed this match and I would recommend anyone to go and watch it if you haven't already seen it. Overall, this match received a rank A. WrestleMania 15, Big Boss Man. Late 1998 saw the arrival of The Undertaker's Ministry of Darkness stable. In the months leading up to WrestleMania 15, the Ministry of Darkness and The Undertaker aimed to take control of the entire WWE. This led to a feud with the corporation and ultimately a match with the stable's enforcer, the Big Boss Man, inside the Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania. As I've just mentioned, this match was inside Hell in a Cell, which was a very nice stipulation to be added onto an Undertaker match at WrestleMania and certainly added a different element and a different feel to the match. Before the match began, we got to witness a very cool Undertaker entrance with a whole new music change and a new look to match the Undertaker's Ministry of Darkness persona. This was very different to the type of Undertaker we were used to seeing in previous WrestleManias. Undertaker was also back with Paul Bearer, which was just excellent to see. It was an awesome look and showed a much darker side of The Undertaker, which I thought was incredible. Before the match even began, it was very interesting to see how these two men would square off. On one side, you had the very dark Ministry of Darkness Undertaker, and on the other side, you had the corporation's enforcer, the Big Boss Man. There was a nice start to the match as the Big Boss Man was able to bloody Taker's face, and this match looked like it was going to deliver something incredible. However, the match soon picked up a very slow style. The match became very physical, there was a lot of striking, a lot of back and forths, and it didn't take much before The Undertaker was able to beat the Boss Man. Unlike last year's WrestleMania, it simply took 1 Tombstone Piledriver before The Undertaker was able to pick up the 3 count for the victory. Even though this match was inside the Hell in a Cell, it didn't feel like they used the cell as much as they could have. And as we all know, The Undertaker has an incredible history with Hell in a Cell matches, producing some incredible moments. So I was very disappointed to see that this match didn't deliver a standout moment from The Undertaker at Hell in a Cell. After the match, there was a very interesting moment as Taker was stood inside the ring, standing over a defeated Boss Man, and the Brood lowered themselves from the ceiling onto the cell roof. This was a very cool visual, as we had members of the Ministry of Darkness surrounding the cell. However, this moment took a very strange turn as the Brood tied on a noose to the top of the cell and lowered it through the roof to The Undertaker. The Brood then ziplined back up into the arena's ceiling, and we never saw from them again. With a noose now in his hand, The Undertaker tied the Boss Man up, and the cell began to raise. Obviously, the Big Boss Man went up with the cell and began to hang. The lights went out and a strobing effect began to take place. This led to a very uncomfortable visual, as we were witnessing the Big Boss Man being hung right in front of our eyes. Now I know that the Ministry of Darkness Undertaker was a different style for him, and it brought much darker elements to his persona. However, I think this was a step too far and I don't think it was necessary to do within the match. The match itself wasn't terrible to watch, however this moment pushed the rank down in my opinion, so I'm going to give this match a rank D. WrestleMania 17, Triple H. Oh, how things changed for The Undertaker. It's now WrestleMania 17, 2 years had passed since we saw the Big Boss Man and that horrific moment after the Hell in a Cell match. We were now treated to a potential classic match between The Undertaker and Triple H. We had an awesome live entrance from Motorhead, who played Triple H's song as he strutted down to the ring. Then it was time for The Undertaker's entrance, and if you hadn't been following The Undertaker's story since WrestleMania 15, you were in for a huge shock, as The Undertaker appeared, riding a motorbike, dressed as a biker, to the song Rolling by Limp Bizkit. This was a huge character change for The Undertaker. Undertaker drove himself down to the ring, and the entrance didn't deliver as much excitement as the old Undertaker's entrances used to. It was a very quick start to the match. There was no messing about as it got straight into heavy strikes between the two men. It was a nice fast-paced opener, which was good to see. The match itself was very interesting. There was no slow spots. It was always action. And it certainly felt like we were building to something bigger here, rather than slow spots and sudden moments. This was a brilliant match between Hunter and The Undertaker, and during the match, there was a chokeslam followed by a pin, which was kicked out of. The Undertaker then attacked the referee and the ref got knocked down. And for some bizarre reason, as referees get knocked down in professional wrestling, they don't get up for ages. This allowed the match to transition out of the ring and into the crowd. As the men began fighting in the crowd, a whole lot of excitement suddenly got introduced to the match and the crowd were loving what was happening. The two men began to climb up this scaffolding, and once they were at the top, The Undertaker delivered a horrific chokeslam off of the scaffolding and Hunter dropped a considerable distance. The Undertaker followed this up almost immediately with a diving elbow attack. This type of excitement was very different to the type of stuff that we're used to from The Undertaker at WrestleMania. So I was all for what was happening in this match. The match returned to the ring and The Undertaker tried to use the sledgehammer on Triple H, but was hit with a low blow. The Undertaker then delivered the devastating tombstone piledriver, but with no referee there, he wasn't able to pick up the victory. He then attempted to hit a last ride on Hunter, but Hunter was able to get the sledgehammer and reverse it. However, this didn't save him for very long, as The Undertaker was able to hit another last ride and pick up the victory. By this point in the match, The Undertaker was pouring with blood, which added a great visual to the match and really showed you that these two men had been in a fight. I thought this match was excellent and possibly one of the greatest Undertaker matches we had seen up to this point at WrestleMania. If you haven't seen it, you definitely need to go and watch it now. And if you have seen it, go and watch it again anyway because you will thoroughly enjoy it. Overall, I'll give this match a rank A. WrestleMania 18, Ric Flair. 1 year on and The Undertaker is still doing the big evil badass Taker gimmick. So just like last year, you can imagine he rode his way down to the ring on his motorbike to face none other than the legendary Ric Flair. This match had the stipulation of a no disqualification match, which only meant one thing, but we're not going to get into that for the moment. The match began and Taker was dominating Ric Flair. Ric Flair was showing next to no offense and wasn't trying to attack Taker very much at all. Eventually Ric Flair got busted open by the heavy strikes that Taker was delivering to his face. Ric Flair was able to gain an advantage for a short amount of time and hit a good few chops, which the crowd were loving, but it quickly went straight back to Taker delivering some heavy strikes to Flair. The match was very slow and it was difficult to watch at times. It was very one-sided as we were just watching The Undertaker dominate Ric Flair and deliver some vicious strikes to him. You could see the mentality of The Undertaker wasn't to pick up a quick victory in this match, as at one point he delivered a pin to the Nature Boy, but only to break the pin himself before continuing to beat down on Flair. Flair tried to fight back and was able to use a lead pipe and a metal sign that he gained from the crowd to get a bit of an advantage. However, this didn't last too long. During the match, JR referred to The Undertaker's winning streak at WrestleMania, which I believe is the first time this has been mentioned as a streak at WrestleMania by the commentary team. As the match continued, Ric Flair was able to lock in the figure 4 leg lock, but was unable to pick up the victory with that move. Now, as I'd already mentioned, a no DQ match always means one thing, and that's outside interference. Of course, Arn Anderson gets himself involved and hits an incredible spinebuster to The Undertaker. However, this still isn't enough to put the dead man down. Taker tries to deliver the last ride to Flair, who's able to fight out of it, only to be later picked up into a tombstone and put down for the 3 count. As the match finishes, The Undertaker has picked up an incredible victory over the legendary Ric Flair, and Jerry the King Lawler begins to shout 10-0 on commentary. It seems like WWE were finally going to hammer down the fact that Undertaker was on a winning streak at WrestleMania, as after the match, Taker stood on the apron and counted his fingers until he got to 10, signifying to the crowd that he had won 10 WrestleMania matches. This certainly felt like the official beginning of the streak era in WWE. Although this match wasn't terrible and it had some good spots to see, it did seem quite one-sided, which I didn't enjoy. I think having a bit more back and forth would have added a new element to the match and gained more excitement. Overall, I think this match deserves a rank C, However, I think this is a very high rank C, as a little bit more in the match would have been enough to push it up to gain the rank B. WrestleMania 19, Big Show and A-Train. WrestleMania 19 offered a very different type of match for The Undertaker. The Big Show had injured The Undertaker in late 2002. He then made his return at the 2003 Royal Rumble, and although he defeated The Big Show at No Way Out, A-Train would get involved and attack The Undertaker. Nathan Jones, a newcomer to WWE, come to the aid of The Undertaker, and this set up a nice tag team match between the two at WrestleMania. However, just before WrestleMania was set to take place, Jones was attacked by the full-blooded Italians on an episode of Heat, turning this scheduled tag team match into a 2-on-1 handicap match instead. So Undertaker entered WrestleMania 19 knowing that if he was going to keep his 10-0 streak alive, he would have to defeat two very big men in The Big Show and A-Train. The Undertaker got a live entrance this year, which are always great to watch, as Limp Bizkit played the song Rolling for Undertaker to make his way to the ring. As the match began, The Undertaker tried a very quick chokeslam to try and finish the match, but this only resulted in a 2 count. This match certainly had the opportunity to provide us with a real threat to The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak, as the audience must have believed that it was near impossible for The Undertaker to be able to defeat these two big men. However, in reality, this match was very messy. There was no real flow to the match, and it was a very sloppy piece of wrestling. Every time The Undertaker would gain the upper hand in the match, the other partner would get involved by breaking the flow, and this happened often enough for the match to become boring, as there was no real sequence to the match. Interestingly, during the match, the A-Train kept shouting at Taker and calling him the big dog and referring to his yard, two phrases that we have become very accustomed to hearing in recent years with a very different superstar. Towards the end of the match, Nathan Jones was able to make his return and help The Undertaker pick up the victory by delivering 2 stunning kicks to both The Big Show and A-Train. This allowed The Undertaker a chance to hit the Tombstone Piledriver on A-Train and gain the pinfall victory. There wasn't anything too exciting about this match, and personally I found this match very boring to watch, as there was no sequence and not really much of a storyline to the match. WWE had the opportunity to create a real threat for The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak, and in hindsight it didn't feel like they achieved this at all. I don't even feel like this added anything to The Undertaker's character. Overall, I think this match was quite unnecessary, it was very sloppy, and for that reason I will give it a rank F. Well, that's it for part 1. What a journey we've been on, from WrestleMania 7 all the way to WrestleMania 19, and we've seen some very interesting matches along the way. Make sure you join us for part 2 of The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak graded, as we discuss every match from WrestleMania 20 all the way to the streak ending at WrestleMania 30, and we even discuss what happened after the streak ended. What are your thoughts on the first half of The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked the video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and be sure to turn on the notifications to always stay up to date with all the content from us at Pro Wrestling Weekly UK. I've been Liam from Pro Wrestling Weekly UK. Thanks for watching. See you next time.